Yeah.
This is gonna be really professional. This is my friend Taylor.
Hey.
So, this is the first episode of my local activist series where I talk to my friends who do activism about the kind of stuff they do and maybe help you figure out how you might want to get involved in your own community. So, Taylor, give us a little introduction. Who are you? What do you do?
Oh gosh, that's a lot. Hey, my name is Taylor Harrison. I am 27 years old and I'm an alumna of Bowling Green State University, class of 2012. Currently, I'm the Ohio State organizer for URGE, Unite for Reproductive and Gender Equity, and I do some integrated voter engagement work as well as organizing here on BGSU's campus with the help of Morgan and Force.
A whole lot of the stuff I do I would not be able to do without help from Taylor. She encourages me so much. What issues are you most passionate about?
That's hard. I've sort of found a trick, which is reproductive justice. And the great thing about reproductive justice is that it's actually encompassing of a multitude of issues, right? So most people think, right, reproductive health, abortion, birth control, sex education, and that's totally a part of it. But also, racial justice is reproductive justice because mothers of color cannot necessarily enter into motherhood confidently when they're afraid that, you know, if they're black mamas, that their children could be shot in the street by police, or if they're immigrant mamas, that they're, you know, they might be deported or their children might be deported. Racial justice is reproductive justice, so is environmental justice.
Yeah,
You
an
know?
example of the intersection of environmental justice and reproductive justice would be like how there's the crisis happening in Flint with the lead in the water.
Right.
And how it's difficult to raise children when they're
Or even
like
carry children to term.
right, when there's lead in your water supply. I actually made an intro video to what reproductive justice is, kind of like a basic primer, so I'll link to that in the description and you can go watch it. So, what got you into activism and what were your first experiences with activism?
Oh wow, okay.
This might date you a little bit.
Yeah, it might. I grew up in a household where there weren't a lot of dudes around, right? My dad wasn't around, my grandpa wasn't around. So I grew up in a household that was completely like women femme-centric and like femme-powered. I didn't know that sexism was a thing, right? Because to me, women could do anything and did do everything like effortlessly and amazingly. So then when I got to college and realized that that was not how the rest of the world operated,
Yeah.
right? I was like, oh, I have to do something about this. So my first foray, if you will, into activism and political awareness was actually in the Slack message. It was actually in the 2008 election. I voted for Barack Obama, and I was a freshman in college that year, and it was amazing. I remember going to the election watch party and seeing him be elected, and like, that was my first election, and that was the first time that I had felt really intrinsically a part of the civic process, and it like made me feel empowered. From then on, I was just kind of like, how do I use this power to affect positive change, right?
Yeah.
I transferred to Bowling Green State University, where I was a member of the Organization for Women's Issues, now Force. I met a lot of really awesome activists and organizers that were doing a lot of really great work around birth control and abortion access and Take Back the Night, and I had a wonderful opportunity to direct Vagina Monologues, which if you all haven't seen it, you definitely should give it a watch. It's a little cis-sexist. It's a little more than a little sexist. But I think it's a really powerful play for folks with vaginas to see and feel a little bit less shame about their parts, right? Back in 2010, the city of Bowling Green passed a non-discrimination ordinance that protected folks' gender identity, gender expression, and sexuality. I got to be on that campaign. And it was the very first time I ever canvassed, and I like knocked on doors and registered people to vote and was like talking about this. I didn't even know I was queer then too. It was really cute. We're actually now in the process of trying to expand that law too, which is really awesome because it feels like it's kind of come full circle.
What was a recent experience you had that was really impactful?
This past August, URGE had their first summer camp. We had workshops on racial justice, queer and trans liberation, etc. At the end of the week, we did a presentation because we had a series of cultural organizing. So we did like screen printing and Theater of the Oppressed. And during Theater of the Oppressed, they did a situation that was had to do with race. And it was a situation where a white cop had assumed that somebody that worked at a place was the perpetrator that they had been called to take care of, as opposed to, the actual perpetrator.
Yikes.
Somebody, a white person in the crowd, when responding to like, why did this situation happen? What happened here? They mentioned basically respectability politics and was like, they weren't all like, da-da-da, and that's why the cops didn't, and they did the head motion and everything, and it was really just kind of like, one of my coworkers, the Georgia state organizer for URGE, Eshe, who is a person of color and incredible, sort of stopped the situation and gave just this like incredible speech about how important it was to recognize that even in spaces of social justice that people still make mistakes, and that URGE is a space of learning instead of like dragging that person publicly. It was because everybody knew who was being talked about, right?
Yeah.
They were like coming at it with grace, right? Like, take this as a learning opportunity. Don't sit there and sulk in your grief. Don't sit there and feel guilty. But take this as a, you fucked up, don't do it again, right?
Yeah.
And it was amazing because it's like every time I feel like I know enough, I'm suddenly confronted with how much I still don't know. That's one of my favorite parts about being an organizer, is just I'm constantly learning how to be better and how to hold other people to higher standards of accountability so we can live in the world we all envision.
What was the most difficult experience you've had?
You're not always going to get along with everybody. Just because you have the same ideals as people doesn't mean that you're going to mesh well as humans. We're all so mindful and so cognizant, and we try really, really hard to sort of allow each other to exist. But sometimes you just like cannot stand a person, or sometimes a person's really toxic, right? Like there are toxic people in social justice circles, in queer circles, because the personal is political, right? When we talk about these things, tempers are already sort of elevated just because these are our lives we're speaking of, right? They're not these grandiose, out there things.
What makes all of this worth it for you?
Oh, what doesn't? The first thing is just that it's the right thing to do. The other really big thing for me too, though, is the people that I get to work with, like you. I have had the incredible pleasure of watching you grow from a young freshman who like giggled nervously and had to be convinced to talk to other folks, to organizing your own protest like pretty much by yourself, to see the passion within people and to see them be able to use that passion and feel empowered to use that passion. That's incredible.
I'm gonna get emotional. What the fuck? Thank you. The point of this series is to inspire people to become more active in their communities. So what advice do you have for people who might just be starting out and don't know how to start?
It's so much easier than you think it is. The thing that comes to mind most is having relationships with your elected officials, particularly on a local level. I have literally emailed City Councilman John Zanfordino of Bowling Green Ward 2 and said, hey, I would love to sit down with you over coffee and chat about this problem affecting people here in Bowling Green. And I've met with him 4 times now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was that easy. I mean, sometimes you have to email them
a few times
because there's a lot in their inbox, but the point is, like, you are their constituency and they are obligated to listen to you.
It's their job.
It's their literal job to do. If they don't answer your first email, send a second. If they don't answer your second email, call. If they don't answer your call, show up to their office. It's called escalation. Something else that I would suggest is figuring out what you care about most and then doing some research about what the laws and policies around that issue look like locally, state, and nationally, right? So again, if abortion is your big issue, you might want to know that the House just passed a 20-week ban, and so that's going to the Senate, and so the next big step is to call your senator. Check and see where their offices are, right? Like maybe they have an office locally. Bob Latta has an office here in Bowling Green, so we can actually go physically to his office and deliver letters, postcards, petitions, pledges, or just bodies with our demands, right? So a lot of the times, young people in particular feel sort of disenfranchised from the political process. Most folks don't know this, but millennials are the largest voting bloc that exists right now, like even bigger than baby boomers. So if all millennials voted, like, we could affect some pretty serious change.
Register to vote!
Register to vote!
Update your voter registration if you've moved or changed your name.
or haven't voted in the last 4 years.
That too. There's actually a really handy video series by Hank Green called How to Vote in 50 States, and if you want to find out how to vote specifically, I will link to that in the description. Alright, I think that was a good video.
Awesome, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for talking to me.
Of
You're
course.
a blessing.
Oh god.
Okay, so I will be talking to more of my friends who are activists in the future about different issues that they're passionate about. So look forward to that and start getting active in your communities. And I will see you in the next video.
I forgot I wanted to do a plug.
Do your plug.
Okay. Hey y'all, if you're interested specifically in volunteering in Northwest Ohio around reproductive justice, and specifically with URGE, Unite for Reproductive and Gender Equity, you can go and join our Facebook group where we post updates about all of our upcoming events and volunteer opportunities. bit.ly/URGECAN. And URGE can change the world. And so can you. So the very first thing that got me into activism was... No, I have to start over.
The tripod is falling.
I also sniffed my armpit.
I know.